So what we're going to be going over in this next lesson is surface area. And so our objective is to first kind of think of surface area as composite geometric figures. And so a composite is like when you take a bunch of little things and you put them together and you come up with something bigger. So you probably have seen maybe some composite photos, and they come up to something that when you look at it, you have a totally different figure. And so that's what a composite figure is. So I'll show you one when we actually do our online lesson today. So we're going to look at how we can do the surface area by looking at it as a composite geometric figure. And then we're going to be looking at finding the surface area by also looking at the nets of prisms. So our goal is to calculate the surface area of just rectangular and triangular prisms. And so here's our standards that we're looking at. And we're just going to focus today on just the nets themselves. It's a little easier. So why surface area? So surface area, first of all, it's the sum of the areas of the faces of the polyhedrons. So remember, the polyhedron is a 3D solid figure. So like, for example, down here, this is a polyhedron. A beach ball is not a polyhedron because doesn't have faces. It's technically a sphere. So it kind of has a net, but we're not going to worry about that. So we're just looking at ones that have polygons. And so we're just going to focus on the prisms and rectangular prisms and triangular prisms. Okay, so why would a person bother to even do surface area? Well, things like painting the walls, okay? How many gallons of paint should you buy? We don't want to buy too much. We don't want to buy too little because we want to keep our costs down when we are painting our house or painting a school. So we need to measure the surface area of the walls. So we would go ahead and look at finding the measurement of the surface area of that rectangular prism that's a room. When we buy the materials for a container, whether it's a crate that we're using to box up the boxes and tables and furniture that's going to go into moving our household goods, or a cardboard box that we're going to be using to ship something, or Amazon's going to be shipping to us. How much cardboard needs to go into that box. Or we need to, later on, when you start learning how to do the surface area of the vinyl that goes into that beach ball, or the atmosphere that surrounds our earth, we can go ahead and we can measure those surface areas. Okay, so that's why we measure surface area. So now let's take a look at how we do it. So remember, the net of a prism is, and specifically the kind of prisms that we've been working on, the rectangular prism, the triangular prism, it's basically you're taking it and making it flat. So here's the net of a triangular prism. It's composed of the lateral faces. If it's a rectangular, it's going to be its lateral faces, which is 4 rectangles, plus the 2 polygon bases. And for the rectangular prism, it's 4 rectangles plus the 2 rectangular bases. For the triangular prism, it's 3 rectangles and 2 triangular bases. Okay, so here's our triangular prism, and let's go ahead and find its area. So it's as easy as this. We're going to go ahead and we're going to calculate the area of each individual piece. So I have 1, 2, 3 rectangles. And I'll use a different color. I have 1, 2 triangles. Now, to make this easy, we are going to be using some things that are going to be true. Most of the time, we're going to have some that are going to be congruent to each other. So our bases are always going to be congruent. So that means our triangle at the top and our triangle at the bottom are going to be congruent. So bases are congruent. And congruent, remember, means exactly the same. So if I get the area of number one triangle, I automatically am going to have the area of the second one. So the area of number one is going to be equal to the area of number two. Okay, so not always, though, are the lateral faces are going to be congruent. Okay, so let's go ahead and make sure that they are. Okay, so this says that the height of this rectangle is 23. So remember, rectangles have opposite sides congruent. So if this side is 23, then that means this side over here is going to be also 23. And of course, that means the other side of the rectangle is also 23. And that means the other side is also 23. And of course, if the bottom of the rectangle space is 14, then the top of it is 14. And I see the top of this rectangle is 14 in the middle. Then the bottom of rectangle number 2 is 14. And if the bottom base of rectangle 14 is rectangle 1 is 14, then on rectangle number 1, the top base is also 14. Okay, so now I have the dimensions of every single one of the rectangles, and so now I have enough information to know that all three rectangles are congruent. So that tells me that for, let's go ahead and do some labels over here. So I know that my triangles are congruent. And now I know that my rectangles are congruent. Okay, so if I go ahead and I get the measure of one rectangle, I'm going to be able to figure out, the area of one rectangle, I'm going to be able to figure out the area of all three. Okay, so let's go ahead and now we need some formulas. Okay, so I'm going to write down my formula I'm going to be using for my area of my triangle. So area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. So here's the measures I need for the triangle. My base and my height are always going to be connected by my right angle. So my base would be 14. My height is going to be the 12 1/10. And I have to divide by 2. So now I go ahead and I do the math. So I get 14 times 12 1/10 is 169 4/10, and then I divide by 2, and so that gives me 84 7/10. And that's going to be square centimeters because this is area, not volume. Okay, so hold that thought for a second. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to find the area of one rectangle. So now for the area of one rectangle, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the formula for one rectangle. So I know that the area of a rectangle formula is the base times the height. So the base of my rectangle will be 14 and my height would be 23. So I have 14 times 23, and 14 times 23 is 322. And my units would be centimeters squared. Okay, now I'm not done because the area of this whole entire thing isn't just one triangle and one rectangle, it's all of them. How much do I have? Well, I have 2 triangles and I have 3 rectangles, so I have to add all of those together. So my surface area is the sum of all of those together. So I have to add my triangle plus my triangle plus my 3 rectangles and then I can get my area. So I would have to add my area for each one. So I have 2 areas for my triangles. So 84 and 7/10 twice, plus my 3 rectangles, which were 322 each. And now I go ahead and I find the sum of that. And I get 1,135.4. And remember, this is still area, so it's centimeters squared. Okay, so in summary, to find the area, okay, surface area from the net, you're finding the area of each face, and you're adding those areas together.